Welcome. We're glad to have you join us to learn more about the Stevens Initiative Award Competition. This is Melissa Ingber. I'm director of the Stevens Initiative, and we're appreciative for all of you who have joined us today. We'd like to start with a few key housekeeping notes. This webinar will run for 1 hour, and we will address all questions in the second half of the webinar. We'll start with a brief explanation of the initiative and then the award competition. Listeners can see more information about the competition at aspen.fluidreview.com and about the initiative in general at stevensinitiative.org. We will then go through the applicants' frequently asked questions and take listeners' questions. As participants, you're currently muted. If you wish to ask a question, please type it in the box labeled questions, or you may click on the raise your hand icon, and we will call on you as time permits. So to emphasize, we will go with the written questions first, and then we will reach out to the raise your hand questions after. We will share all the FAQs on the competition page of the stevensinitiative.org website, and we'll post a recording of this webinar on that site, as well as on aspen.fluidreview.com, which is the application website for those who are not able to attend. To tell you a bit about the Stevens Initiative, it's an international effort to expand access to virtual exchange to hope to build global competence for young people in the United States and the Middle East and North Africa as a lasting tribute to Ambassador Chris Stevens. Through structured online engagements between youth at various education levels, the initiative aims to give young people skills, including communication, collaboration, empathy, language, and problem solving, and deepen their understanding of and ability to engage with people from other cultures and backgrounds. The initiative is housed at the Aspen Institute and is a collaboration between the family of Ambassador Stevens, the U.S. Department of State, the Bezos Family Foundation, the governments of the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and Algeria, and also LRNG, Microsoft, Twitter, and video. We should begin by defining virtual exchange. While this is still a new and growing field within the larger context of connected learning, the initiative defines virtual exchange as programs that use online technology to connect individuals in small groups between countries, are based on a curriculum, and involves qualified facilitators such as educators or others, and involves sustained communication and collaboration in real time or asynchronously over a period of time. Through direct support for the virtual exchange programs and through other field-building activities, the Stevens Initiative seeks to raise awareness and demand, establish a shared understanding of intended outcomes and key progress indicators, to provide access for young people who would not otherwise be able to participate in international exchange, and increase sustainability, affordability, and ownership across involved communities. This is the second in a series of award competitions for organizations to run virtual exchange programs and support in-person exchanges to complement participants' virtual exchange experiences. In our first competition, the Stevens Initiative made awards to 10 U.S. organizations, reaching more than 21,000 students in 25 U.S. states and 17 countries in the Middle East and North Africa. The Stevens Initiative's other activities include raising awareness of how virtual exchange can contribute to critical learning goals for the communities it reaches, strengthening evaluation and research, forging partnerships with the private sector to provide technology platforms that facilitate virtual exchange, and holding events to bring stakeholders together, practitioners, and experts from related fields. Now, to tell you more about the competition itself, I'd like to introduce Henry Sheppard.
Thanks very much, Melissa. It's great to be with you guys here today. With this award competition, we're seeking to expand access to high-quality virtual exchange to thousands of young people who are otherwise unlikely to have access to international exchange. We aim to support programs that are engaging and beneficial for the proposed participants and that are logistically feasible and cost-effective. Applicants to this letter of interest round are strongly encouraged to demonstrate how their programs contribute to one or more of the following funding priorities: programs that focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, programs that use project-based learning, programs that serve refugees from the Middle East and North Africa, programs that use innovative methods such as virtual reality or immersive experiences, use mobile platforms, use video games, programs that use language other than English as the primary language, for example, Arabic, French, or others, or use automated or machine translation, and programs that connect people from more than 2 countries. We're also interested in supporting programs that include in-person exchange to complement the participants' virtual exchange experience. Applicants proposing to conduct a virtual exchange program that will be ready to be implemented by fall 2017 are expected to demonstrate a promising track record and a strong base of partnerships, curriculum materials, trained educators or other facilitators, and technology, such that the exchange can be iterated, improved, and expanded over the course of the period of performance. Applicants proposing to develop new virtual exchange programs are expected to demonstrate that the adequate time and resources will be dedicated to establishing partnerships with implementing institutions, develop curriculum, training educators and other facilitators, and setting up an online platform before the exchange begins. Briefly about applicant eligibility. The competition is open to tax-exempt nonprofit organizations and educational institutions based both in the United States and based in the Middle East and North Africa. Applying organizations may be based in other regions if the proposed exchange program serves refugees from the Middle East and North Africa. In terms of the competition timeline, this award competition has two phases. The first stage, which requires a letter of interest, is due on November 30th for organizations based in the United States and November 21st for organizations based in the Middle East and North Africa. In the second stage, after an external review committee of independent experts reviews the proposals, the Stevens Initiative will contact finalists in early 2017 to submit full award applications. The agreements will be signed in time for awardees to begin their work in June 2017. Terms of the award. Organizations may request between $20,000 and $700,000. The award amount requested may not be more than 40% of the applying organization's fiscal year 2015 annual operating budget. In all cases, organizations should demonstrate their capacity to plan, implement, and evaluate programs of the scale they propose. The maximum duration of the award is 19 months beginning June 1st, 2017, and the period of performance ends no later than December 31st, 2018 for all awardees. In terms of our target audience, participants should be young people in the United States and in the Middle East and North Africa. They should be in the secondary through post-secondary education levels, from middle school through graduate school. However, participants do not need to participate through an education institution or be enrolled in education in order to participate in a Stevens Initiative program. Also included as participants are educators, facilitators, and other group leaders who work with the young people participating. Applicants should make a special effort to include a diverse range of participants, including girls, underrepresented populations, the disabled, and other groups whose access to exchange programs has been limited. As we've mentioned before, we are also very interested in reaching communities at risk, such as Syrian and Iraqi refugees. In terms of program content, the Stevens Initiative aims to support programs that lead to increased cross-cultural understanding, build language, communication, digital literacy, problem solving, and other global competencies. This means the range of possible subjects or topics for the curriculum of the virtual exchange is quite broad. In terms of partners, we encourage applicants to identify partners who will work with you to implement the program, including any schools, universities, nonprofit organizations, or others that will connect young people in the United States and the Middle East or North Africa. In terms of platforms, organizations can propose to use the technology platform that best suits their program design. Investment on building new platforms should be limited whenever possible or explained and justified if necessary. In terms of the review, letters of interest will be assessed based on the following criteria: institutional capacity, program feasibility, cost effectiveness, emphasis on reaching those whose access to exchange has been limited, including girls, underrepresented populations, the disabled, and other groups, statement of need, appeal to proposed participants, contribution to participants' global competence, and alignment with the Stevens Initiative funding priority, which we mentioned above. Now I'd like to go through a few of the questions that we've already received several times from organizations. What format should the application be? The letter of interest phase consists of short and medium answer questions that are typed into an online form. The only way to submit this information is by typing the text answers into the form on the site aspen.fluidreview.com. Can an organization submit more than one letter of interest? Yes. If the programs are distinct, if they have staffing, content, participants, and so on, if they have different staffing, content, participants, and so on, they may be proposed separately. Can an applicant participate in more than one proposal? For example, be an applicant on one proposal and be a partner on another proposal? Yes. If the proposed programs are distinct, the organization may be referenced in both cases. Are applications from one country or region preferred over applications from other countries or regions? No. No preference is given based on the location of the applicant. Who should submit the letter of interest? An authorized officer of the applying institution should submit the letter of interest. How many awards will be made? There is no fixed number of awards to be made. What is the selection process? The Stevens Initiative will convene an independent review committee of experts from related fields to review letters of interest and recommend which organizations should be invited to submit a full application. To what extent does the program plan need to be developed at the letter of interest stage? At the letter of interest stage, organizations may include details of plans or materials in place, such as a plan to use a specific technology platform or curriculum. Alternatively, the proposal may describe how the organization will use time and resources to develop a program with the support of the Stevens Initiative. We intend to support programs at both of these stages. In terms of the funding priorities, how important is it for an organization to cover one of the funding priorities in its programming, and to what extent? Organizations are strongly encouraged to show in their letter of interest how their proposed program addresses one or more of the Stevens Initiative priorities for this round of the competition. Fit with one of these priorities, as we mentioned earlier, is a scoring criterion for this competition, though choosing not to address one of these priorities will not disqualify a letter from consideration. You mentioned that in-person exchanges are a priority. In-person activities and travel raises the cost of programming, yet cost effectiveness is prioritized for evaluation. Will higher cost programs that include in-person activities be penalized? We recognize that travel for in-person exchange, whether for youth or for the educators or other facilitators, adds to program cost. We welcome the inclusion of in-person exchange if it contributes to the participants' overall experience. In terms of audience, in which countries can programs operate with Stevens Initiative funding? Programs should connect young people in the United States with young people in the countries of the Middle East and North Africa as defined by the U.S. Department of State. These are Algeria, Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Oman, the Palestinian territories, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. Programs involving refugees from these countries who are currently in other countries are also eligible. So please note, on the list that I just mentioned, Turkey, Sudan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan do not fall within the Middle East and North Africa as defined by the U.S. Department of State and are not eligible for this competition. Is there a specific number of participants that the Stevens Initiative expects a program to reach? No. We expect proposals to show a realistic plan for providing access to high-quality virtual exchange to young people who would not otherwise have access to international exchange. Cost effectiveness is one among several factors that contributes to the strength of a proposal. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, what expectations do you have of applicants to write monitoring and evaluation into the letter of interest? We expect organizations to briefly describe their monitoring and evaluation plans in response to the question on this subject. Please note that, as we describe in the call for proposals on our website, we expect award recipients to work closely with us and with our evaluation experts to implement monitoring and evaluation. Approximately how much of the proposed budget should be comprised of monitoring and evaluation? The appropriate amount will vary across organizations. We encourage organizations to include the cost of strong monitoring and evaluation in the proposed program plan. In terms of partnerships, can the Stevens Initiative connect me with partners such as schools, technology providers, or policymakers? We encourage organizations to pursue their own partnerships. Organizations may contact us by email with specific questions, and we will share relevant information if we have any. So this concludes the prepared questions that we received in advance from applicants. Just as a note, as we move on to the next segment, as participants, you are muted. If you wish to pose a question, please type it in the questions box on the GoToWebinar platform, and we will get to your questions in the order in which they were posed. Or you may click the raised hand icon in the program, and we will call on you as time permits. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Christine, who will share with us any questions that she has either in the question box or that we may have received recently by email.
Thank you, Henry. We received a question from Elizabeth. The question is, one of the priorities for funding is programs that serve refugees. Does this include internally displaced persons?
Thank you. It's a great question. Internally displaced persons are certainly eligible through our competition, and reaching them is very important to us. So yes, they may certainly be included as long as they're from the countries listed earlier.
Great, thank you. We also received a question from Megan. There were a few questions beginning with question 1. Our program would like to emphasize women. Would it be fine to have a participant target of 80% women, or is there a specific criteria the Stevens Initiative will be looking for?
Thank you. This is a great question. There are no specific criteria that we'll be looking for to reach populations that have historically not been included in exchange. A program that puts a particular emphasis on reaching women and where women make up the majority of participants is eligible and acceptable.
Great. Is there a maximum number of countries that the Stevens Initiative is envisioning should be engaged in a specific proposal? Also, is it necessary to have local partners in each of the participating countries?
Thank you for the question. Proposals should clearly show how work will be carried out in all of the countries to be included. There's no set number of countries that should be included. We fully expect to see several proposals that do bilateral exchange between the United States and just one country in the Middle East and North Africa. We also expect to see proposals that are multilateral in the sense that there will be participants in the United States as well as participants in more than one country in the Middle East and North Africa. And the program plan should be realistic to attain that regardless of how many offices or partners may be involved.
Great, thank you. Is there a target range for how many weeks long each session of the program should be?
There isn't a target for how long the program should be. One of the core principles of the field of virtual exchange today is that engagement between participants should be sustained, which is to say individuals from both sides of the exchange should have a chance to communicate with each other more than once so they get to build familiarity, understanding, empathy, collaboration skills, and some sort of bond or mutual understanding. That may be possible over just a few meetings over a short period of time, or maybe a few meetings that are over a spaced period of time. There are several proposals that we've seen in the past that run for several weeks, some run up to a semester, and some have actually proposed to run longer than a semester. And we're open to all of these variations.
Great, thank you, Henry. We also received a question from Alyssa. Her question is the call for proposals intended for single organizations to use, or is it possible for one organization to obtain the grant and sub-grant or divide it out to its members or multiple organizations?
This is a great question, and it's a bit of a complicated phrasing, but if I understand correctly, there has to be one organization that is the prime award applicant and prime award recipient, and they have to be eligible according to the rules that we mentioned earlier, tax-exempt, nonprofit, educational, or non-governmental organizations. But those organizations may partner with various organizations to implement the program, whether they are sub-award recipients based in the United States or abroad, or other firms or other organizations, partners of any kind based in the United States or in other countries.
Thank you, Henry. We received a question from Erin. Her question is, can you clarify perhaps with example what distinct programs must be to apply as a standalone applicant and as a partner?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Sure. Can you clarify what distinct programs must be to apply as a standalone applicant and as a partner?
Thank you. I think some of this probably should be discussed on a case-by-case basis for organizations that are interested in pursuing this. But what we have in mind is that if a proposal shows completely different work where no participant in that proposal is being compensated or measured for performing the same work on both proposals, that both of those proposals can be considered separately. So as long as the level of effort is not being repeated from one to the other or the same outcomes are not being delivered in both cases, as long as the work is distinct, then both of them could be considered. Keeping in mind that one of our selection criteria is institutional capacity, and if it seems that the capacity of the organization would be overtaxed by carrying out both projects, that would be something that the committee would want to keep in mind.
Great, thank you. A question from George is, should the organization be a 501c3 if it is in the United States?
Thank you. This is a great question. I have to admit that I'm not a tax status expert, but 501c3 organizations, which is to say federal tax-exempt status, are eligible. There are other tax-exempt statuses in the United States, for example, for educational institutions, and those tax-exempt nonprofit organizations are also eligible, although their status may not be precisely 501c3.
We have a question from Peter, who asks, are simple technologies like Skype okay for the virtual exchange?
Thanks. This is a great question. We feel that the exchange should be well supported and well overseen by those who are convening the program, and we feel that participants should have an engaging and technologically well supported experience, and that can be delivered through off-the-shelf applications in certain circumstances. So we feel that platforms such as Skype or others that are well known may be usable as part of the experience. Of course, Skype works for synchronous or real-time interpersonal activity. It is not good at facilitating asynchronous communication, so you may want to include a method for communicating between the live sessions as well in order to make it a richer participant experience.
Thank you, Henry. We also received a question from Adam. His question is, do you prefer letters of intent that focus on a particular area, example, STEM, or can they focus on many areas?
This is quite subjective, and so I hesitate to give a firm answer, but I think if I understand the feedback of our committee last year, programs that had a clear subject or a clear purpose and was seeking to attain certain and clear outcomes were typically stronger than those that sought to cover several different topics. So I think there should be a clear unifying theme to the program so that the participants come away with something specific and that the organization can evaluate on specific terms.
Thank you, Henry. We also have a question from Megan in email. Her question was, is there a target cost per participant that the Stevens Initiative has in mind?
Thank you. This is a question that comes up a lot and one that there's no firm answer for. But I will say we recognize that programs operating in different countries, programs operating at different scales, and programs at different levels of development, which is to say programs that may already have made investments in core technology and training facilitators in reaching partnerships, they may have different costs per participant, and we are receptive to that and understand that. So there's no target number or target range in mind, but we hope that the organizations can show reasonable costs and can show every effort has been made to make this as affordable as possible, keeping in mind that virtual exchange has the opportunity to greatly expand access to international exchange for people who wouldn't otherwise have access to international exchange. So one point of reference might be the cost of a comparable in-person exchange experience. I think it's our intention that virtual exchange be more affordable than a comparable trip. Although, of course, the richness or duration or impact of the experience may not be exactly equivalent.
Thank you, Henry. We have a question from Amy who asks, are you able to apply for this grant if you are a for-profit organization that enables virtual exchange programs between students in the U.S. and North Africa and the Middle East?
For-profit organizations may not be prime applicants for this award, but for-profit organizations may be partners on this competition. So a for-profit organization may find others and may be a sub-award recipient or a contractor on a tax-exempt nonprofits application.
Perfect. Thank you, Henry. We have a question from Meredith who asks, Stevens Initiative prioritizes youth, but to confirm, we could propose a program that focuses on teachers or others who work with youth as well, correct?
Thank you. This is a great question. The Stevens Initiative seeks to support programs that bring young people from these regions into contact with each other. And so it is necessary that the program does connect young people from the United States and the Middle East or North Africa over the course of the program at some point and in some scale. In terms of the expenses incurred by the program, it is possible that many of the expenses or much of the time might be involved in preparing curricula, training teachers, having teachers collaborate to arrange the virtual exchange, and that is all permissible and expected activity. But we do expect there to be some virtual exchange that is sustained between participants, young participants at the middle school through graduate school level in the United States and the Middle East to be included in the program plan in addition to any other educator training or exchange that may occur.
Thank you, Henry. A question from Sonia. Do we have to demonstrate that we have an existing partnership with the institutions abroad in order to be considered more competitive?
Thank you. We are trying to support programs that both have partnerships and plans well in place and that are able to implement quickly upon receiving the award, as well as programs that have a more broad plan and are interested in developing partnerships, curricula, technology platforms during the period of performance, recognizing that the field of virtual exchange is small and growing and can be greatly developed with sufficient support from an initiative like the Stevens Initiative. So we will consider proposals that are both more prepared with more partnerships and details developed, as well as those that need more time during the period of performance to develop that with our community and with our support.
Great, thank you, Henry. We have a question, a comment, I'm not sure, from Amy, who says, these exchanges are enabled through schools or NGOs in these areas.
Is this a follow-up to the point about the
Yes.
for-profit
Yes.
organization?
Yes, it is.
Technically speaking, the prime applicant for our award and the recipients of our awards need to be nonprofit tax-exempt organizations. Whether a for-profit organization can be involved in that work, yes, a for-profit organization can be involved, but the prime applicant, the prime recipient of our award has to be a tax-exempt nonprofit organization based on the rules that we've been given by our partners at the Department of State.
Thank you, Henry. We have a question from CD who says, using the term sustained and working with displaced persons, is Stevens looking for sustained beyond 19 months of funding working with the same displaced population?
Thank you. This gets to a very important distinction that I'd like to make. The term sustained can refer both to the length of a particular participant's exchange experience, as well as to the program in general. And when we talk about a sustained exchange experience for the participants, we're talking about how many times or over what period a program participant would connect with other program participants. And what we mean by sustained is that they have contact through more than one meeting or through more than one round of asynchronous communication. And so the work of the award would all occur within that 19-month window, and we would expect participants to have more than one contact during that 19-month window. We don't make any specific demand that the organization carry out work beyond the period of performance of the award, but we certainly hope to see plans that show that the program is practical and could be supported beyond the initial period of the award so that the work may carry on and be scaled or replicated.
Thank you, Henry. We have a question from Jessica who asks, do you have a policy regarding NICRA or an overhead rate?
Christine, could you take that question for us?
Sure, I would be happy to. We do have a policy. The policy is basically that you can submit your NICRA if you have one negotiated with the federal government already, or if you have not had a NICRA, you are eligible to receive the de minimis rate of 10% on modified total direct costs. So you can submit for that as well. But there is no limit on your NICRA rate. Thank you. Okay, yes, we received another question from Elizabeth who says, are there already developed groups from the target countries that an applicant from the U.S. can be matched with?
Thanks for this question. We have, of course, been in touch with organizations from across the United States and across the Middle East and North Africa, and we have not set up a system to match prospective partners or award applicants with each other. Those who are interested in pursuing partnerships, we strongly encourage you to do that work independently and to seek partnerships from your network. However, if there are specific questions about possible resources in very specific circumstances, we are open to hearing those questions and providing any information that we may have, but I think that would be best taken up in direct email communication between us and any particular organization that had questions about that.
We have a question from Susan who asks, is there a level of technology access that we should assume that the participants will have?
Thanks for the question. It very much has to do with whatever you and your partners have determined based on the needs assessment and the capacity that you find in the partners that you have in mind. So if there is an organization or a school that you propose to work with in one of the participating countries, it would be important to make sure that the plan include all of the appropriate steps to set up the technology, to do logistics and training, to make sure that those folks were fully included and empowered to participate in the program. So that should be accounted for. It's not something that we can provide information about. I think that would be something to work on with your partners.
We have a question from Barbara. Barbara asks, how do you calculate cost per participant? Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. We have a question from Julie. Can current SI implementers apply for new or follow programming?
Thank you. The awards are currently running. They are currently active for current Stevens Initiative Award awardees, and it is not the time to extend those awards. That can be discussed separately. Organizations that have already received awards from the Stevens Initiative are eligible. They're not technically ineligible. If there were a new proposed program, we would want to see that it was fully distinct from the current work and can be carried out without overburdening the capacity of the organization seeking to do that work.
Great, thank you. A question from Sonia. How have technology access affected the success of the program, and how have you measured success in past funded projects?
Technology access is something that, again, organizations work out with their partners and have to make sure that it's properly budgeted for and accounted for. We've seen, of course, situations where access to technology has become a challenge, but I think those challenges have largely been, addressed and overcome. And organizations should be clear in their work to show that proper time and attention will be spent making sure that platforms are in place and working well for the circumstances, whether that means an appropriate platform chosen for a low bandwidth setting or something like that.
Thank you. We have a question from Elliot, who says, we are a fiscal project and under a 501c3, so would we qualify? If you are fiscally sponsored under an FSP, the FSP would have to apply for the award. Okay. The next question we received is from, no, I think that's it.
Have we run through all the questions?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Andy, who will call on folks and unmute you one by one. So she's looking through the attendee list, and she's finding people who've clicked the raised hand button. And she will, actually, hold on just a moment. She will click unmute, she will announce you, and then I will try to answer your question.
Great. I'm just going in the order in which I saw hands go up on our webinar. So the first hand that I saw was from Sabrina Faber. I'm going to unmute you now, Sabrina. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Sabrina, can you hear us?
All right, we will move on to the next question. Let's see, our next hand is from Matthew Parks. Matthew, I'm going to unmute you now. Matthew, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't have a question. It must have been clicked earlier.
No problem, Matthew.
But thank you very much, and thank you for this wonderful summer.
Thank you for attending. We'll move on to the next question.
All right. Let's see. We have a hand up from Colin Hogan. Colin, you are unmuted.
Colin, can you take the mic?
All right, we will move on. And folks, if you have already had your question answered, if you could please kindly put your hand down, just select that hand function, and we will make sure that we don't doubly answer your question. We have a hand up from Elizabeth Rafferty. Elizabeth, you are unmuted.
Hello, you already answered my question. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
Christine, we have another question from
Sure.
the...
We have a question from Denise. Mm-hmm. If we have the capacity for two projects, one with high school students and a separate one for college students, must that require two proposals, or can we submit them together as two parts of a single proposal?
I think this very certainly by circumstances. We would be open to seeing either of those permutations, depending on what made sense for your organization.
All right, we have a hand up from Walter Sagana. Walter, you are unmuted.
I'm sorry, my hand looks like it's down. Sorry about that.
No problem, Walter. Thanks for being here.
All right, I think we have a hand up from Emily Cow. Emily, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if you would accept students who are younger. We have a program that starts at age 7.
Thank you, Emily. We're not able to include participants younger than the middle school age level. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you see Sonia there?
I see a question from Erin Helland. Andy, can you unmute Erin?
Sure. All right, Erin, do you have a question?
I do. I wanted to understand, we've had a number of organizations approach us about partnership, and I believe the ability to be sustainable and meet capacity is somewhat contingent upon award from us as a standalone applicant. How would we best have a partner put that in if we are sub?
Absolutely. So let me just restate it to make sure I understand it correctly. You're saying that the capacity to carry out the work proposed would depend on how many of the proposals actually came to fruition. Is that right?
Yes, that, and if our proposal was accepted, we would have far more capacity to partner with others.
Understood. I would say that we're attempting to not have any dependencies between different proposals. As much as possible, we would like the committee to be able to consider them separately. But I think if you make it clear in your prime proposal that there were some dependencies like that, the committee would be able to account for it as well as they could. I hope that some of the complication involved would be minimized by the fact that there's a letter of interest stage and then a following full application stage, and some of that will get clarified as various of those either are put forward or not put forward. Erin, does that seem helpful?
Excellent. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Andy, are there other folks who have questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Julia Heitner. Julia, you are unmuted.
Hi, I have a question for current grant awardees applying for this new iteration. If it would be allowed to do a program that is an improvement, reiteration, or an expansion of our current grant work, or if it needs to be an entirely separate programming.
As I mentioned before, the work needs to be entirely distinct in the sense that there not be any double counting of outcomes or of level of effort, anything like that. It sounds like what you're describing may be somewhat on a gray zone between those things, and so it may be best to get into the details separately because that will not be relevant to the majority of folks on the call. But as I said before, current awardees are not ineligible, but the work needs to be distinct in at least from compliance and financial perspective. And I think the details should be followed up separately. Thanks. Christine, do you have a question?
I do, from Ibrahim, who asks, if part of our exchange includes connecting youth in South Africa and other non-MENA countries to their peers in MENA and the U.S., will we be required to ensure all funding is spent only on the MENA U.S. branch?
Walter, thank you. You've answered the question for yourself. Yes, Stevens Initiative funding can only be spent on the participants in the United States, in the Middle East, and North Africa, and only for the work that they are doing connecting with their peers between the United States and the Middle East and North Africa. People from other countries, other regions may be involved in your work, but that work cannot be supported by the Stevens Initiative. Andy, do you have a question for me?
Yep, we have a question from Sonia Fagenbaum. Sonia, you are unmuted.
Sonia, can you take the mic?
Yes. Hi. I was wondering, can you tell me if there can be a disciplinary focus or like a problem-based something that's based on problem solving. So, for example, from a technological perspective, can there be a program that focuses on developing applications, mobile apps, and that brings together the students from the U.S. And a country in either North Africa or the Middle East?
Thank you for your question. As we mentioned, our purpose is to support programs that build global competencies. There are several frameworks out there that we think are helpful to talk about those global competencies. So as long as the proposed program achieves those or is likely to achieve those objectives, then I think it's eligible. In terms of getting into details about project-based learning or science, technology, engineering, and math, we leave it to applicants to explain and justify how what they're proposing might meet one of those particular funding priorities. Based on what you've just described, that may be possible or may not, depending on how you mean to explain it in detail. But I hope that generally helps. Christine, do you have another written question?
I do. I have a question from Alyssa who asks, for distinct projects, do the resources need to be entirely separate? For example, if the projects include different partners, countries, and objectives, but staff from the organization that receives the grant oversight is the same, would that be acceptable?
Thanks. Certainly, at the very least, the level of effort from those core staff who are doing oversight would need to be distinct, so that if it were a portion of their time, that the portion not be overlapping, that it be separate and distinct work at the very least. Certainly, this would be something that the committee would look at as a question about whether the institution had sufficient institutional capacity to do all of that work in conjunction with the rest of their portfolio, which is, I think, something that would be well reflected at the full application stage and less so at the letter of interest stage. If you have more specific questions about how much overlap there can be in resources used, we encourage you to email us and communicate with us about the specific circumstances. Are there other written questions, Christine?
Yes, I have another question from Megan. Megan asks, you mentioned that there are several frameworks that the Stevens Initiative finds helpful to talk about global competencies. Could you please share what these frameworks are?
The Department of Education has published extensively on the subject, as has the Asia Society. And we encourage folks to consider some of those, although there are other resources and other experts active in this field that may be useful as well. We don't use one definition at the exclusion of all others.
I have another question from Patricia. Patricia asks, can you give details about using English as primary language for programming?
Thank you. Many virtual exchange programs, including the United States, use English as the primary language of the virtual exchange. As we said in our funding priorities, we are enthusiastic and very open to any proposals that show another language as the primary language of communication, whether by automatic or machine translation, whether by having live human translation, or whether by connecting American learners of other languages with people in other countries that speak those other languages. We want to move the field of virtual exchange to be more inclusive of people who do not speak English proficiently.
I have a question from Nancy who asks, you mentioned that one of the priorities is for projects that include in-person exchanges. Just to confirm, are we able to include those exchanges in our project budget, or is the idea that we would fund those exchanges with complementary non-Stevens resources?
Thanks for the question. We're always very open to and enthusiastic about any possible cost sharing, especially for travel or anything else that's not directly a part of the virtual exchange. However, with our priority, we do mean to directly, with Stevens Initiative funding, support in-person exchange when it complements the virtual exchange program.
Thank you, Henry.
We still have a hand up from Elliot Gann. Elliot, do you still have a question? All right.
Are there any other written questions, Christine, that you might have gotten or by email in the last few minutes?
No, nothing so far.
Annie, do you have any more hands up over there?
Let's see. Don't think so. Oh, Elliot says that he just tried to speak, so Elliot, I'm going to unmute you again.
Elliot, if we're not able to hear you now, please do type your question in the question box. And the same goes for anyone else Typed questions typically are easier, so we encourage any additional questions to be typed. It seems like we may end a little bit early, so we have a few more coming in. We'll turn to those. Elliot, do you want to take the microphone? Christine, while we're waiting to see if he can chime in or maybe type his question in the chat box, I'll turn it back to you for a typed question.
Sure. Patricia asks, would grad students include in target countries include all degree programs and PhD?
I can't think of any particular degree program that we would deem ineligible, so PhDs and other graduate degree seekers are all welcome to be included in proposed programs. Are there any other hands up or typed questions that I should get to?
I have a question from Meredith, who asks, is it required that we have in-person activities in addition to virtual exchange activities, or can we do strictly virtual activities if a blended methodology isn't appropriate to the program model?
Thank you. Proposals are welcome to include just virtual exchange if that's the best method for your situation. Many of our proposals that we've seen in the past are just virtual exchange with no in-person component, although many proposals do include a form of in-person training or travel for educators or other facilitators, and some proposals have included in-person exchange for the youth participants, and as we say in our funding guidelines, you may include an in-person component for educators, facilitators, or youth participants, but it's not required.
Thank you. Jessica asks, many exchange programs require obtaining visas. May funding be used to cover the cost of obtaining visas?
Christine, I'll let you speak to the question about the paying for the cost of visas, but I will say that the Stevens Initiative works closely with our partners at the State Department to ensure that all visa applicants, applications, and trip oversight are handled appropriately. But Christina, I'll turn it back over to you for the question of payment.
Sure. Visa costs are an allowable cost as long as they are short-term visa costs and not long-term visas. I have a question from Stephanie, who asks, can you speak a little bit about the 100-word limit discrepancy?
There was a situation where we had an earlier version of a document posted on our website under the resources section, and it had an erroneous word limit listed as 60 words. Before we published the competition, we intended to change that limit to 100 words for the short answer questions and 150 words for the longer question about the program description. We have tried to remove all references to the erroneous shorter limit. And to be clear, the limit for short answer questions is 100 words, and the limit for the longer question about the program description is 150 words. And if you encounter any technical issues with the Fluid Review platform, please don't hesitate to email us, and we'll make sure that it gets handled. That includes any time between now and the deadline, and certainly on the deadline day. If you encounter any problems, please reach out to us. We're here to make sure that you don't have any issues submitting your application.
A question from Nancy says, did I understand correctly that if we do not have a NICR, we are able to include up to 10% of total direct costs in the budget to cover project administration? The answer to that is yes. You can collect up to 10%, but not of total direct costs. It would be off of the modified total direct cost base. And that's something that I can send you some information on, or you can easily Google and find out what that means. Thank you.
Are there any other hands up, Andy?
I have a question from Colin, who asks, will this webinar be archived on the website?
It is our intention to have recorded this and to archive it and post it on our website. So yes, Colin, we will make every effort to get it up and online shortly.
Also a question from Barbara, who asks, are the visas J1 visas?
Christine, can you help us handle this, or are there others that can chime in?
I think this might speak to the previous questions about visa costs. And for participants coming into the United States, those are J1 visas. It's different if participants are leaving the United States and if a visa is even necessary. But you can work with the Stevens Initiative to process that, and those are allowable costs.
Thanks, Andy. Christine, are there any other typed questions that you see right now?
Nope, not at this time.
Andy, do you see any other hands raised? I see a few stray hands, although they may be left over from earlier questions.
Yeah, I do not see any additional hands raised.
So I'll just give you 30 seconds to type any more questions into the questions box. Other than that, I will wrap up and just say that we're really glad that you all joined us for this call today. Thank you so much for your interest in the initiative and the award competition. I want to reiterate the letter of interest deadline is November 30th, 2016 at 11:59 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time for organizations based in the United States, and December 21st, 2016 at 11:59 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time for organizations based in the Middle East and North Africa. If you have any questions about the competition, about the Stevens Initiative in general, or anything at all, please email us at stevensinitiative@aspeninstitute.org. Once again, the website to access the competition is aspen.fluidreview.com. And I revert back to email if you have any questions. We look forward to hearing from you. Christine, are there any other typed questions at this point?
No.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really glad that you're interested in the initiative, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing your letters of interest soon. Thank you very much.